Thank you, Sarah, and the team for coming back at such short notice for us today. As we all know, councillors have a lot of questions, in particular on the Golden Mile. So we're just having another Q&A session. I'm going to start taking a speaking list. What we're going to do is we're going to spend at least 30 odd minutes answering some questions. Then we're going to look at some detailed designs, and then we'll see how we go. So first, I've got Councillor Paul. Yes.
Morning, thanks for coming back with us today. I just wanted to confirm some things. So can you confirm that there will be no net loss of bus stops in the Lambton Quay area when you take into account the Waterfront Quay PT stops?
Sure, go for that.
Sorry, I'm just reaching the push button. There will actually be a net gain in bus stops in the central CBD when you start to factor in some of the other programs that are happening, particularly the second spine project.
Do you guys have a plan for how you're going to communicate that to the public? Because I think that, a perceived loss of bus stops is a real concern, particularly when there are some issues with cancellations and delays.
Sure, I can answer that one. So we're just now working on the communications plan for between when funding, design and TR decisions are made and the communications we will undertake prior to construction, and that would include exactly that story.
Cool. So you're really going to emphasise that point around that
we
there will be more bus
stops.
stops.
That point, for sure.
Awesome. And then is there going to be, there might be a reduction in bus shelters on Lambton Quay, but will there be an increase in the shelter and seating available for people at the stops?
There won't be a reduction in shelter on Lambton Quay. There'll be an improvement to the shelter on Lambton Quay. So there are currently stops that do not have shelter, such as Manners Street near Cuba. We will be providing shelters at those locations.
Cool.
I wonder if I might ask Metlink to talk a little bit more about their proposal for bus shelters, but also just what the changes to the stops mean for the system, the service.
Yeah.
So is Metlink here?
Yes.
Welcome, Metlink. Thank you. That's incredible. Cool.
If I could call on Dave Hum or David Boyd in the first instance, hopefully they are Metlink.
Yep.
Dave Hum.
Kia ora koutou, Council. Can you hear me? It's David Boyd here.
Yes, we can hear you, Dave.
Yep. Great. Look, I'll just give you an overall view of the amenity we're providing at each stop for passengers, and then maybe just quickly go down the Gold Mile to talk about the level of coverage we're providing. So what we've done at most of the sites, except for Willis Street, is model the anticipated number of passengers that we'll have at each stop. And in the centre of Lambton Quay, that means there'll be an increased number of passengers because the two Lambton Quay stops will be consolidated. And the same will be for Manners Street. There'll also be some extra passengers, as well as Courtney Place with the stop consolidation. The amenity at the stop, we're currently at 60% designed for the shelters, which Metlink is funding. They will provide nearly full shelter for all those anticipated passengers, but also factor in the shelter that's provided by the existing buildings on those sites for any overflow. They're much larger shelters than we currently have. They're purpose designed to meet those capacity demands. They have additional seating compared to what we have today, which is very minimal seating. They'll also have enhanced accessibility features, including a greater level of tactile features on the ground for blind navigation and audible real-time information digital signage to aid people with visual disabilities. The real-time information will be upgraded as part of Metlink's real-time information upgrade program. So there'll be signs akin to the current signs we have, but also ground-mounted RTI signs with digital posters and more passenger information for passengers. So if we go down the Gold Mile, we'll be providing extra shelter at both ends of Northern Lambton Quay. And a particular pain point for customers at the moment is a lack of shelter at the Supreme Court site. That will be bolstered significantly to meet projected passenger numbers. There'll be a particularly large shelter for the stop that is in effect replacing the David Jones stop that will be able to accommodate up to 90 people. We think at the very busiest, there'll be 100 people at that stop in the evening peak. That would be for a very short period of time. There's also existing building shelter behind that. So that'll be the biggest set of shelters along the Golden Mile. Across from that, there'll be a smaller shelter, but there'll also be the existing shelter offered by the building awnings. Willis Street won't have any shelter. We believe that the site by Unity Books was working reasonably well from a customer perspective, though it will have all the more seating and more RTI. And due to lack of available pavement width to sort of separate pedestrians from waiting bus passengers, we're unable to put extra shelter on the Grand Arcade side of Willis Street. So that will be a bit of a necessary compromise, unfortunately, but we do believe there'll be enough waiting space along the shop front as there currently is now. If we move to Manners Street, we will be providing shelter by the old bank building on the corner of Manners and Cuba, where there currently isn't shelter. So there'll be a significant improvement there, and also upgrading the shelter which needs replacement across by the Oaks. Both of those shelters provide an opportunity to improve perceptions of safety in that area, particularly in the evening. Then we move down Courtney Place. The shelters there have already been earmarked for replacement. They're not in a great condition. They're also not great from a safety perspective because they're in closed spaces. So we'll be providing the new shelters there. There'll be additional shelter, more shelter there than there than there currently is. And also worth noting that the shelter on the southbound side by Blair Street will be split into two stops. One stop catering to southbound buses, and the other catering to eastbound buses. Any questions?
Is that all good?
Yeah, that's great.
Councillor Young.
So I'll start with my bus stop question. So what is the retailer's view on thinking of Vance Vivian's having 100 people outside their shop? I mean, do they regard that as a plus or a minus? Because not many of them will be buying suits. How do you know? Well, because I catch the bus down there, and half of them are women, at least half are women who don't buy men's clothing generally.
So I will ask Dan to answer the question.
Yes, so I think it's safe to say that in particular some retailers impacted by the stops being moved in front of their premises are not favourable. Yep, that's about all I can say on that subject.
So the other question, I've got two more questions. One is, so there are going to be mobility parks for people with mobility, what's-its. What about people who don't qualify for those, or people who are temporarily disabled? Will they have access to the, I can't call them mobility parks because they won't be, but can they have access to places?
Yep. Roger, go for it.
So my understanding is that for mobility parking permits, there are different categories, and there is a short-term and a long-term version. So somebody that was temporarily had temporary mobility issues could apply for those. But I suspect if you're looking at a couple of weeks, then they may not wish to apply for a mobility permit for that time. But I think if it were a matter of months, then they could.
No, I'm thinking of people on a couple of weeks have to be on crutches or that kind of thing.
Yeah, so they would have the ability to apply for a mobility parking permit. I suspect many would not because of the short period. And for somebody like that, they could find the nearest car park, or if they were being driven by someone else, then if somebody's dropping a passenger or picking up a passenger, that can occur from certain types of loading bays. where it's not restricted to commercial vehicles and or authorised or permit holders. Many of the loading bays within the central city are restricted to commercial vehicles and authorised vehicles only, but there are a couple of loading bays that somebody on crutches could be dropped off and picked up.
So roughly what percentage would be of the loading bays would be in that category?
The vast majority are commercial vehicles and permit holders only.
So I think it's fair to say, however, though, that's not really a change from the current situation.
But I thought this was about improving people's accessibility.
Yes.
Can we let the team answer, please?
So it's not a change from the current situation in terms of the way that mobility permits work. So we're not proposing that is changed. What Roger has described is exactly as the circumstance would be now if you had a mobility issue and you wanted to access a mobility park. So that isn't a change. It's also often, I would say, not that I take my car down Lambton Quay very often, but it's also not particularly easy to get a park outside the place you want to go to in Lambton Quay now, but we have bolstered those mobility parks in those side streets, so they are just around the corner from most premises, and there will be more of them. So that's really the change.
Yeah, but my question is not about the mobility parks, it's about people who have short-term disabilities who need to be dropped off rather than a park.
Sure, Councillor Young, and I understand that, and I suppose what I was saying really was just that there's actually no change from the current situation for that particular scenario than the situation that you have already.
Except at the moment you can drop them off. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Randall.
Yes, I've got a few questions, so I'll just focus on the bus ones. What are the changes to the bus services that are under these plans, and specifically also what is going to happen to the buses that currently use the Brandon Street bus stop?
So I'm going to refer again to Metlink, to David. David, if you could talk us through what these changes mean for the bus service, and particularly if you could mention what happens to the Brandon Street situation. Hopefully he's still there.
If I may, it's Alex Campbell here, Principal
Alex.
Advisor Network Design. I'll just jump in on this question regarding Brandon Street. Part of the design is that Brandon Street will be, we understand, from 2025, and that we do have currently peak bus services using Brandon Street. We are currently working with Let's Get Really Moving on opportunities to reroute those buses onto an alternative route through the central city, which we're ahead of the future planned second spine for mass rapid transit. So there's opportunities being looked at to, which are already being included in work being done on the Featherston Street project to look at stops on Featherston Street and utilising existing southbound stops, a stop that exists on Wakefield Street in Michael Fowler, and looking at the opportunity of whether we can then run those buses in the afternoon peak northbound along the quays, and that, again, working with partners on this to see what opportunity we can then get, an opportunity, a way for us to find to get better coverage and access for customers on these services so they can get to more places in the city, have more choice of bus stops, more places they can get to. So looking at the second spine is very much an opportunity for us to give customers enhanced access to the central city and everything it has to offer.
Okay, so just to be clear, you don't know where they're going to go right now?
So I can help with that. You will remember that we've just recently consulted on ideas for Featherston Street. So we are progressing that work. It's a City Streets project. And so some of that work is related to resolving the Brandon Street challenge.
So I'll put it to you, I guess. You don't know where they're going to go right now?
There are plans in place for some of the buses to go down Featherston Street.
Okay.
It's not the entire
I know, I just want to know where the bus stops, where they're going to actually stop.
No, I couldn't tell you
Okay.
exactly where they stop yet.
And so that also applies to the use of that bus stop for cruise buses, because obviously that's the key part where the cruise, all these cruise liners, which are, a key factor in our retail revival, that there's no clear spot where they are going to come into the city and be picked up and dropped off.
Do you have any information on that, Roger?
But Councillor Randall, you're talking about the shuttles from the cruise ships?
Yes.
Yes. So when we met with, I think it was Grow Wellington, Wellington NZ, yep, thank you, a year or so ago, they talked about their use of the bus stops opposite the old Amora Hotel, and that was one of the main drop-off and pick-up points they used. One of the reasons they used that drop-off and pick-up point was because of its proximity to the information centre at that time. So they were dropping cruise ship passengers at a place where they could get information about all the activities that they could do in Wellington, and they showed us the routes that the cruise ship shuttles take, and so we've worked forward on that basis.
So because I know that there are lots of cruise shuttles, and when we talk shuttles, they're full-size buses, because obviously there are thousands of people are on these boats. They currently use the Brandon Street, but are they going to go and use that stop now at Wakefield Street?
I think that the cruise ship shuttles would need to probably use the bus stops that are being designed into Feathers Street and onto the quays, because they wouldn't be able to turn in Brandon Street.
Okay, and those stops aren't defined yet?
No, they're not, because we're just at the early stages of that project and we haven't got to the end of SSBC stage at all.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much. I have a couple of questions. Talking about the consolidation of the Lambton Quay bus stops, now is the prime purpose of the consolidation of these to save time so that buses don't need to stop so frequently? And if you look at the passengers that would be catching the buses from those different bus stops at the moment, they would all congregate around the bus stops that are available. So wouldn't that cause a congestion in those areas? Have you considered that?
So I think you've got two questions there. What that does for service, and then the congestion on the footpath.
Yes.
Per se. Okay. Metlink, could I ask you please to talk, anyone from Metlink, to talk about, first of all, the service changes. So what the consolidation does. There's some saving in time but increase in frequency, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I'll just give a bit of a quick reply on that if I can. Again, the Golden Mile project identified a level of capacity that the Golden Mile, the new transformational design of Golden Mile, deliver for buses. And on that basis, we actually, again, we have to kind of look to the second spine, which there's a longer term project as part of MRT, and then what we do in the interim. So that we're not just piling more and more buses into the Golden Mile, which, as you say, would result in more crowded bus stops and would result in more congestion of buses. For the Golden Mile and to operate to its optimal level for customers, there is that dependency on the future second spine.
Okay, I'm not sure whether my question was answered, but...
Can I add to that?
We can help you do that.
So the direct improvements to the Golden Mile will improve journey time and reliability. They will also address some of the key pinch points for pedestrians along the network. You are correct in terms of the consolidation of bus stops will result in approximately 50% more customers as those existing customers move to a new stop. That is offset by improvements to the reliability and journey time, which mean buses attend those stops more frequently. That means people can get on and off buses faster, reducing the amount of people that actually need to wait and store at the bus stop itself.
Okay. I guess the reason why I'm asking this question is if I look at the bus stop directly outside Whitcoulls down here, when I go down there at peak period, there are so many people waiting at that area for bus stops that they crowd onto the footpath, and so people, pedestrians walking past, find it very difficult to actually walk around them or walk in between them. So I'm concerned that if there's more congestion, then, or if there's more bus stops being taken out, then that congestion will only increase.
That's exactly
I could, Yeah, I can answer this. I think quite a key thing of the shelter and the stop design from a Metlink perspective is that we're at most sites now able to separate waiting passengers from pedestrians. One of the current challenges we have is exactly the thing you point out. There's a clash, particularly when people move from the side of a building onto a bus. So at most of the sites, with the exception of Willis Street, we'll be able to have quite a clear definition between waiting passengers and pedestrians, which will be a benefit for both groups.
And just and just to add, the philosophy, especially behind Willis Street, Lambton Quay, is increased pedestrian space. Mm-hmm. So for overflow from bus stops on those odd occasions, we've got lots of space that we're building into the project, and when we look at the maps later on, you'll be able to see that as well.
Okay, thanks. Okay, and my second question is also around bus stops. You're talking about the bus shelter designs. Now, I understand that the bus stop that you're talking about at Courtney Place are relatively small and enclosed, and so that there is a safety issue there, because if people perhaps are accosted or approach inside those bus shelters, they have little ways of being able to get out. So I understand that. So you're talking about the new bus shelter design being able to take up to 90 people. Now, 90 people is a heck of a lot of people.
Sorry, Councillor, can we get to your question?
Yeah, so I go to the railway station, and that would be the biggest bus stop that I know of, and I doubt if there are 90 people there. So how are these going to be designed? Can I see a concept of it, perhaps?
Not in this form, because we're still at 60% design, so there's still some design details to sort out within Metlink, who are funding the shelter design. But just to give you a sense, the largest shelter structures are on the centre of Lambton Quay, where we expect the most passengers. Courtney Place is actually quite a different stop in terms of passenger use. It's actually quite moderately busy throughout the day, and particularly in the weekends. So it's not actually a heck of a lot more busy in the evening than it is, for instance, on a Saturday afternoon. But there are considerably less number of people using Courtney Place at the peak of the peak. I think, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, probably about 30 people at its busiest at any one time. So as I said, we have modelled the shelter that we required against the anticipated numbers we expect at each of those stops. The design of the stops is semi-enclosed, if you like. They're quite tall canopy structures, very deep, about 3.6 metres of roof. Underneath that, there will be a number of panels in the current proposal that will protect people from the prevailing wind, depending on what site they're at.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing those. Thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Mobility providers like Driving Miss Daisy, can they qualify for a permit for the Golden Mile, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. That's just not been quite clear, so that's fantastic. Chamber brought up a really good point around loading vehicles under 6 metres not being able to access, but that actually incentivising a reliance on heavier trucks and diesel vehicles when, we've got quite smart electrification delivery vehicles happening overseas. So is there any ability for them to be able to access the Golden Mile the way that we're carving out the same exemption for loading vehicles over 6 metres?
So within the proposed traffic resolution for the authorisation system, people who have a need to move something that they can't carry in their hands or take for long distances, those people could apply for a special circumstances authorisation for a smaller vehicle. At the moment, the way the traffic resolution is drafted is that they would need to demonstrate that it was the only practical way, and that coming in from a side road just wasn't going to work for them for various reasons.
Yeah, I guess if you're thinking in the context of permanent delivery vehicles, that is sort of incentivising a reliance on heavier diesel vehicles within the city for all deliveries. So anyway, we'll take that. Finally, Manners Street. I thought the point was made that we've done a sort of similar project in Manners Street, and we've seen that area really dilapidate rather than thrive. So what would be the general defence, or what's really core in your ability different to what we're doing in the Golden Mile, so we don't get Manners Street too for the rest of the area?
Yeah. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. I think the biggest difference is the width of the space. So Manor Street is tighter. It's similar to Willow Street in its width. When we get to Courtney Place and Lambton Quay, we've got a lot more space, which means we can put a lot more amenity into that space without that getting in the way of pedestrian movement. So that's the key one. And we have got plans, so we're more than happy to talk through what those details are later on. So,
It's, sorry, just to add to Dan, and Dan's a streetscape designer, so unfortunately I didn't get a chance to introduce him yesterday, our lead streetscape designer. So on Manor Street, we're only focused on that intersection. So that the only changes we're proposing, as you'll see in those drawings, are at that intersection between Lower Cuba and Manors, and a couple of lane configurations as well. So just to be really clear on that. The other point I'd like to add to Roger's response around the electric trucks question was the driver behind Golden Mile and removing the smaller trucks onto the side roads is to free up more space for the buses and to make sure there's less movement in front of the buses. So that's the underlying philosophy behind that, which is all about encouraging carbon reduction emissions.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Kia ora. I did have a bit of a chat with a few yesterday, but just really concerned about cost creep and how, so with that, how will we be assured that the cultural design and the placemaking aspects will not, their budgets won't be crept into? So yeah, just looking for assurance there.
Sure. I might ask our CFO just to talk about the contingency and how that works, because I think that might give you some comfort. But I would say generally that one of the key things to deal with cost creep is not to have delay. So that's probably the key thing, but I'll ask Sarah just to comment on the contingency budget.
So my apologies. So Sarah Brownlee, I'm the CFO for Let's Get Wellington Moving. So in terms of doing the budget estimates for this, what we've put up is a budget at P95, and you would have seen that come through on the slide. Now what that means is that it's done with a certainty, a 95% certainty that we are expecting those costs to come in. We also have estimates done at a P50, which provides effectively a 50% certainty, and then we have what's called a base estimate. And what that does is that as part of developing that P95, we go through all of those risk scenarios in terms of potential for time delays, potential for unexpected items in terms of potential underground things coming up, and that's how we get our certainty. There's probably a couple of other things which also provide a level of certainty around costs. So you will understand that obviously we've done the SSBC and then we moved into a pre-implementation process as well for Golden Mile. Now that included working with what's called an early contractor involvement, so that in fact we can engage with our contractor and they can actually look at the design and actually work with us and make sure that in fact that design is something that's actually achievable. Alongside that, it means that we can also check the reasonableness of those costs with that contractor.
Just in terms of congestion modelling, that was something else that was brought up in the submissions and actually earlier in some of our engagements. How will the traffic flow through the city? Obviously, while it's not flowing through the Golden Mile, have we done any modelling on what that will look like to avoid congestion?
Roger will answer that.
Yes, we did a lot of work around modelling the effects on traffic and also considered what the changes in movement of traffic would mean for people's behaviour. So there is a report which we can make available to you. It's on the website, and there will be localised places where if people, which are already congested, which we'd expect to see continued congestion because of the changes. But the mode shift or behaviour change element is that people who are making shorter journeys, some of those who have the opportunity to change may kind of go, it's taking me a minute or two longer. actually maybe I'll make use of some of the cycleways that are being implemented by the city and take up travel for bus for some of those shorter journeys. But we can make that report that's on the website available to you.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Free.
Thank you. I'm going to concentrate on the bikes today. So how are you going to address the gap in the bike network that's obvious and has been commented on by submitters in the middle of this project? And what in particular, is there any plans to bring forward the 2-lane cycleway on Victoria Street that has been discussed in principle?
So I'll start off with Victoria Street. We're currently doing a business case for what we call the Southwest project, and that includes Victoria Street, and we're working our way through that just at the moment. So we're working through our options, and we've recently just completed some public engagement on the cycleways through there and our options for which side the cycleway might go on. That business case is due to go to Let's Get One to moving early next year, all going well. And then we can make decisions on sequencing following that. So we just really need to finish that initial business case thinking. That work also includes our thinking on Featherston. Coming back to your first question, the gap, I assume do you have a location in mind with your gap?
Manners Street and Willis Street, or Willis Street particularly. Yeah, there was a comment made that you're going to forbid southbound, I think it is. So there won't be any ability on Willis, yeah.
Yeah, so there's not enough room going southbound, so heading towards the south on Willis Street for cycling, but on northbound we are making room for cyclists.
And what sort of changes can you make to improve the connectivity? So if people are still having to sort of wayfind their way through this bit which isn't clear yet, how can you direct them to a safe-ish route? Because some bits will be high quality, some bits won't be.
So wayfinding is part of what we are doing across all projects. So we're working closely with council officers to make sure wayfinding is part of that.
So Sarah, we are working with the program on Willis Street and Manor Street. The status quo is remaining, so we're not suggesting we change anything at the moment, but we will be monitoring, given the timeframes we now know about for the Featherston and Victoria in terms of the primary cycle route. To your question in the email, we could look at something transitional. We don't have any budget for that though. But these are all things that are being considered, and the traffic team will be monitoring as a road controlling authority, but we're not suggesting any change, I think is the main point at the moment. Those restrictions are in place right now, and we know people have asked a lot of questions about them, so we'll be monitoring, we'll be getting our own road safety audit and looking at the options around that.
Yeah. Talking about transitional, has there been any thought to actually trying some things on Lambton Quay, trying removing some of these bus stops just to see what does happen, like just put them out of action for a week and just see what happens. You'll quite quickly find out, I think. And also blocking off with maybe planter boxes or what have you, some of the side roads, just to see what actually happens with deliveries. Because this is a very expensive project, and it wouldn't be a good thing to get it wrong.
With respect to trialling the removal of bus stops, you'd essentially be wearing all the impacts without any of the benefits. So because you're not delivering some of the wider benefits being undertaken there, you'd probably get an exaggeration of the impact.
That's possibly true, but it would show up like where the congestion might be on the footpaths. I just thought it might be worth, if you actually do it really publicly and say we're actually doing an experiment here, we're doing a trial, just to find out what we need to know.
We could consider that and come back to you.
Cool, thank you. Councillor Pennant.
Thanks again for your work, and sorry I was late, so I hope I haven't missed anything. I was just reflecting that I was one of the councillors to agree to the Manor Street change. There were good reasons for that, but now it really is a bus lane. It is not. And I guess I just want to carry on from Ben's question, that we're just going to see buses, and if you're going to remove some of the bus stops, but there's going to be more buses, are we just going to, at certain times of the day, going to see buses head to head, tail to tail? Because it is a pedestrian area primarily, not just a public transport route.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. A lot of the reason we're seeing bus platoons or bunches of buses moving down there is because they're being held up by key delay points along the network. So the intention is to actually eliminate those delay points and allow more of an even through flow of buses, so you see less occurrences of large queues of vehicles storing and a more constant stream of buses moving down the corridor and attending stops.
How many more buses are coming through?
There's no increase in buses. We are maintaining the same number of buses that are currently moving through there, which is currently 86 and 87 per direction of travel. The corridor has a capacity limitation of about 100 buses per direction of travel.
Okay, but you said yesterday that there were going to be more buses but less bus stops.
No, more buses attending each bus stop more regularly. So the same volume of buses is moving along the corridor. It's just doing so more efficiently and effectively.
So you get an increased frequency and reliability.
Okay. Just again carrying on from Ben, the delivery for businesses is a really big concern. We've got a meeting tonight with some of them and they're just absolutely opposed. Are we going to have some good information and time just to be able to show exactly what the changes you've made in response to public feedback, to give them the assurance that they can get their vehicles in to do the deliveries? And that given that they have higher priority than private vehicles, I'm happy to ban all the private cars, that's fine.
Sure. Sorry, I wasn't aware that we needed to provide information, but I'm sure we can.
Oh no, it was just those speaking notes that you had yesterday. Have they come through?
Certainly. So
that's the kind of detail that we need.
Sure. So what we're doing at the moment is just making sure that you can receive them. The file's really big with the speaking notes. The other thing I should say is that those notes were prepared for us, so they're not necessarily in the best format or anything else, but I'm very happy for you to have them.
Yeah, so we just need to be able to say to businesses that the permit system's not going to be administratively burdensome. Can you give assurances that it won't be?
That's entirely the plan, absolutely.
Okay, and they'll only be able to access...
One more question, sorry, Councillor.
Sorry. Like, this is really important. We're going to be...
I know, but other people haven't had a turn. You can come back on
but we're going to get blown up tonight. So,
Tomorrow night.
Oh, I thought it was tonight. Oh, sorry. Okay. So will they have to deliver before 7 and after 7? Or can they go during the day? Sorry, it's just been so much detail.
Certainly, understand. Roger will explain a little more.
So the proposed traffic resolution that was consulted upon for the authorisation system does enable access for deliveries during the middle of the day outside the peak times for buses.
So that's like 8 to 9 and 4 to 5? Or
that
4 to
sort of time, yeah, that sort of time. And the special circumstances category within the proposed traffic resolution would allow somebody to come in during the peak time for buses, but they'd need to sort of demonstrate why coming in the middle of the day was not practicable. But yeah.
Okay, can I go back on the list? Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. I have got a number of questions. I'll just try and keep these just a couple to start with. You talked yesterday about you looked at a number of different options of how you could rescope, recut this particular project. Can you tell me, can you provide a copy of that options paper? Or where I can find it in the documents?
Yes, just bear with me for a moment, because I think on the back of our slides, if you go, we provided you with a slide pack last night.
Yeah.
And right at the back of the slides, there's an options explored piece there. So that is for Thorndon Quay. I'll just check that we also have it. Yes, we also have it for the Golden Mile as well.
Is there a link in that document to where they will be?
No, I'll just show you just quickly.
Oh, just a slide. Oh, yeah, but can I see the paper that you presented to the program board?
So the business case, including the MCA reports, all on the website, so we can provide you.
I've seen the business case, but the
MCA report.
No, I'm talking about the different options following when you decided on when the parties decided on the option C, the transform one. But you've said since then you've worked on, because of costs, you've worked on different options that you presented to the program board. That's my understanding from yesterday.
That's right.
And in terms of what you presented to us now. So I'm just actually wanting to see what you sent, you
the
provided.
options are.
So specifically, I want to see the paper. I want to see the specific options paper that you provided.
I'm really happy to provide the options. I'd need to go back and look at the paper, but I will do that for you and come back to you.
That would be good, and presumably in the date. And what was the decision made? What was the feedback given by the program board in because presumably, could you also clarify whether that options was presented to the governance reference group at any stage?
Usually there would have been a discussion, but I will check that.
If you could check that, that would be really good. One thing I think you talked about yesterday was, I think it was 6,100 vehicles that go through the, I'm not sure whether it was Lambton Quay or Golden Mile, but I just want to understand is, of those vehicles, which ones are service vehicles and which ones are private cars? Do you have a breakdown?
I'll ask Roger if he does.
We don't have we have some information collected at intersections, and I think for the counting the numbers of vehicles moving through, I suspect that was just broken down into heavies and lights, so we wouldn't break that down to commercial vehicles, and one of the pieces of information that has been useful to us was loading bay surveys that we did for a selected number of the loading bays, where we recorded which were commercial vehicles and which were light vehicles. So we have been looking at that balance, but the short answer to your question is that is no. Yeah.
Okay, and if I can just ask one extra question go back on the list. Since this program was formed, one of the core elements was an additional bus spine, knowing that the Golden Mile would never have enough, the capacity. And what we're hearing is there's no more capacity. We spend $134 million, no more capacity for buses. So presumably, I'm just wondering to know where this extra bus spine is going to be.
I'm going to ask Dave Hum if he can provide additional information. What I can tell you is that under the transformational program there is an acceleration package that we are currently working through, and papers should come to the board, the program partnership board, shortly in the next month or so. The idea around the acceleration package, the reason why I'm mentioning it is because the second spine is a consideration for that. But if I can ask Dave Hum to comment further on the second spine, please.
I think Dave has deferred that question to me. So just give you a background to the second spine from a Metlink perspective. As we've highlighted, the design peak capacity of the Golden Mile will be exceeded at a point of around 90 buses in the AM peak, so that will require us to open up a second spine. Metlink have done a bit of work with their customers to understand what the sort of tolerances for moving people to there will involve, and we actually got some reasonably positive signals through that engagement, with the caveat that they would expect a sort of improved level of amenity there. But as reflected in the detailed business case that's being developed for MRT, there is an opportunity there with regards to bus services as well as MRT to introduce some of the core services that go through the city to relieve pressure off the Golden Mile and some of the express style services. So the value proposition for customers there would be you would get a faster journey along the second spine.
Yeah, but where's the second spine going to be?
Oh, sorry, my apologies. The second spine. I guess if you think of it, it has forks at either end, but the core second spine would be from Whitmore Street intersection along the quays. It starts at Jervis and Waterloo Quay, and then there'd be some splitting of that route. I guess different routes would either go down Cable Street or up Taranaki Street and down Wakefield Street. So literally along the waterfront from the Michael Fowler Centre down to the Old New Zealand Post
I'll need
headquarters.
to move on. Thank you, Councillor. So we're now doing another round of questions. Please keep them to 2 and don't try to sneak one into one question. Laurie? No, just kidding.
Could the officers also be succinct with their replies as well? Help?
Yeah, if we could, yes or no, where possible. And just if we just kind of, that'd be really awesome.
No
Thank
problem.
you. Councillor Randall.
Okay. So I've got a hopefully a simple one. Is the Golden Mile Road, has it been cleared for operating articulated buses?
Yes.
Oh, excellent.
Excellent.
Following the instructions. So the other question is, when the modelling was done on the traffic, I just want to pick up on that. Did that include the likely changes to, for example, have under city streets like cycleways along Featherston Street, and as Mr. Hunn just outlined, alternate spine, bus spine down the quays? And is that part of that traffic modelling? Was that included, or was that assumed to be just as it is currently?
We didn't include that. What we included was what was confirmed when we did the work. So we don't include things that might be, although I understand that work is underway now.
Wonderful. Deputy Mayor.
2 questions in one. Have the quays been considered for a better cycleway past the city, and what was the outcome of that?
I'm not sure if I have anyone who can answer that here, but I can take that question away and come back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Pannett.
Thanks. Look, still concerned about the bus stops. So there will be, in the drawings that we'll get on Thursday, there will be exact dimensions, exact locations of where they are, so we can go and check out. And I guess that's the first question. And then the second question is, so I still don't quite see how much, there's not much space. Like, so on the Courtney Place one, for example, where the pedestrians and the public transport users are separated already, how are you going to make more space?
In answer to your first question, yes, you will see that detail in the plans. In answer to your second question, we're reducing the median at Courtney Place, or removing the median, and that allows a build out of the curbs, and that in turn allows for a separation of waiting area and pedestrian movements and other amenity areas.
Councillor Free.
There was a statement that there'd be an increased frequency, increased reliability and increased frequency down Lambton Quay, but I think that might be incorrect because it's the same number of buses. We're already at maximum number per hour.
So in terms of, we're not increasing the volume of buses attending the service, but the frequency of buses, meaning how regularly they arrive and the headway between those buses, will be normalised and increased. So rather than having a gap of 12 minutes and a whole row of buses turn up, you'll have a regular arrival of buses. That's the frequency improvement I referred to.
Okay, all right, thank you. The other thing is, how can I see the work that's been done on the traffic removal? Because I'm not sure how many private vehicles are actually currently going down the Golden Mile, and so how much improvement there'll actually be from removing vehicles once you've got all your authorisations, allowing some of the existing traffic to remain.
Yes, because we've got that traffic report on our website.
Okay, thank you. Is it possible to send a link? Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. I acknowledge that I've had some information about OPEX and CAPEX for Wellington City Council, but I would really, and I see we're going to have the CFO, I'd really like a set of accounts of some sort for Let's Get Welly Moving, so that we can see in entirety what we're contributing, what our partners are contributing. And I ask that because I looked at the single stage business case back in November 2021, and in there's a paragraph where it said that the funding by Great Wellington City Council and Greater Wellington hadn't been resolved at that point, and it was going to be worked through. Since then, we found out they're not contributing, even despite that we have one of their team from Metlink on board. So I'm really interested to, A, get a set of accounts, B, to understand why Greater Wellington Regional Council are no longer contributing? And I'm not going back to the funding agreement. I'm going back to the business case where it was indicated that they would be.
So, first of all, I might ask our CFO to answer further, but the first thing I'd say is it's incorrect to say Greater Wellington's not contributing. They are not part of the funding split in terms of the 51% Waka Kotahi funding and the 49% Wellington City funding. However, they are funding all of the bus stop improvements. So there is funding coming from Greater Wellington as part of this proposal. It's just not inside of the funding split when we talk about the FAR rate and then the Wellington City contribution. I'm not sure how much more information you would like, but perhaps we could just give you a really quick rundown of what the money
Yeah, look, I'll talk to the CFO offline, but probably not for a statement of service performance or something along those lines. We've been hearing about there's still plans to be set in place for Featherston. There's still the second spine. This work's been going since 2016. I want to understand is how are you going to ensure if ratepayers, taxpayers are committing $134 million to this piece of work, how well integrated it is with work planned on Featherston Street, with the work planned for the second bus spine. I'm not talking about MRT because we know that's a separate issue in tunnels and all of that. But for all these things that join up, how I'm not getting a sense that everything's being integrated as well as it could have been in terms of the planning. And I want you to lay my fears, if you can, quickly.
The first thing I would say is that we're working in sequence with what has been agreed. You remember there was the health check. You looked at the 3-year program, the City Streets program are the earlier works or the transitional works, and MRT comes after that. So if I just talk about the transitional, because I think that's what you're concerned about. So we simply don't have the size of team that we would need to be able to do everything concurrently. But we do have, in fact, starting next week, a general manager for the program who is responsible for integrated delivery. We will have 2 analysts who are also going to be working on integrated delivery. That's not to say that we haven't been doing that work up until now, but it's a big job in and of itself, and so we've identified that it's important that it has specialist focus. So we have been doing that integrated work up until now. So when the program talks to you about what we're doing, we very much have in our mind the way that these things fit together. It's just that it's not possible, and you couldn't deliver these things all at once anyway because the city would grind to a halt. So you have to make sure that we're doing the planning with the understanding of what's been thought about for these other projects.
It's the planning which we're finding that there's gaps. So thank you.
So we've got 3 more people on the list, and I'm going to end it there because we just don't have enough time. I'm sorry, Councillor Chung.
We've talked a lot about Golden Mile, but we haven't even covered off Thorndon Quay or Hutt Road.
Yeah.
We're going to have another session.
Yep. We knew there would be a lot of questions about Golden Mile, so we kept the focus to this. We also have some designs which we're going to leave at the back of the room for councillors to go look at after this.
So, Mayor Whānau, what I'd like to offer to councillors is perhaps we could find a time over a lunchtime or something like that over the next few days where our designers could be available and we could actually have the design conversation.
Cool. No, great. Thank you for that. That sounds wonderful. So I'm just going to finish off the list. Councillor McNulty.
Just curious around the choice of taking out bus overtaking options. Obviously, it's quite an inherent part of the experience on the Golden Mile at the moment that we have different buses at different times with overtaking. That won't really be allowed for anymore. So what's the thinking behind that decision?
Yeah, so you're addressing inline versus offline stops. Yeah, so the net change on the mile is actually 0. We're removing 2 inline stops and replacing 2 inline stops. From an overall performance level, there won't be much of a change there. In terms of the logic that underpins why we're applying inline stops at the location we are, which is Lambton Mid, operationally there's no skip stop operation, so buses must attend every stop. So the only variance is really where you get a bus dwelling for an extended period of time when large numbers of people and a bus behind the queue may be able to overtake it. Operationally, that's relatively rare, and the impact of that is not huge. And the offset is that we can buy a bit of space back to separate the pedestrians, really improve the amenity for pedestrians, enable accessible boarding and separate the pedestrian and waiting areas. So it's a trade-off.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, and thank you, Mayor, for letting us have an extended question time. There are lots of questions, and thank you for everyone for having some good answers. I appreciate it. So my question is around the daytime between bus peaks. I certainly accept the buses have priority at peak time. What are the number of delivery vehicles that come in during that day period compared to the number of delivery vehicles that will be permitted under the special purpose vehicles?
I don't have the numbers to my fingertips, but what we could do is look at the size of the vehicles. That would be the best way to determine that, because it's the current proposals are that the larger vehicles that are too big to safely turn in the side roads would be able to apply for an authorisation and come into the corridor, but the smaller vehicles under the current proposals would not. So that might be a way of answering your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to get an idea whether you were obviously going to restrict access. So obviously I'd say the number of special delivery vehicles that are on, say, Lambton Quay or Courtney Place are less, because that's the objective. I was wondering whether they're halved or a quarter or whatever. Any idea?
Or I look, off the top of my head, I think it would be more than half, because most observations of loading bays are that many of the vehicles were smaller rather than the large ones.
Okay, and so the other question is, because it's been talk about providing access, direct access onto Lambton Quay for people who are really disabled or accessibility challenged. Should the council want to permit drop-offs directly on, say, Lambton Quay, would that be supported by the current design, or would more work need to be done to provide the additional space so that driving Miss Daisy could actually get in and stop, drop people off for some time, might take 5 minutes and that sort of stuff?
If that decision were made, then people who have an authorisation could come into the corridor. What the thinking is that the loading bays within the corridor would be not limited to goods vehicles and authorised vehicles like by permit. So you wouldn't need a permit or have a goods vehicle to stop in the loading bays within the corridor, but you would need an authorisation to drive in the corridor. So that would allow people that might be moving house using a car that have got a special circumstances authorisation to stop in those loading bays when they're available.
Yeah, but you think that could be accommodated under the current design if we increase the number? Obviously, many more, of these vehicles. Any comments on that?
Yes.
Great. And finally, Councillor Free.
Yeah, just very quickly, is there any ability to sort of make this decision in two parts so that the Courtney Place, which doesn't seem to be waiting on as many other decisions, maybe could be advanced ahead of some of the other work, which does seem to still have a lot of implications, Featherston Street, second spines, Yeah, is there any ability to split this decision into two?
Obviously, you're part of a partnership, and so the decision that you make also needs to be considered by partners, particularly Waka Kotahi as the key funding partner in this decision. Waka Kotahi's view and the board view is that this is a package. So it's not only a package for the Golden Mile, but it's a package with Thornton Quay Hut Road as well. So you potentially have a partnership dilemma. If the benefits don't stack up for doing Courtney Place in and of itself, that was also an issue for Waka Kotahi, because they look very carefully at the benefits as well. Also, it's worth thinking about how your FAR funding works. So the way that FAR funding works is that there is an allocation of funding over a particular period. If you don't spend that money, you go back into the pot with everybody else, and then you have to compete with everybody else for that money. And there might be other priorities that overtake what this priority might be considered as. So there is a risk in making that kind of decision.
Can I also just add to that this is a project? So the project is the Golden Mile project. It's one whole project. Splitting it up actually will create two projects. So everything we've done to date is premised on a single project, the SSBC, all of the analysis benefits, etc. So you're actually looking at separating into two.
There would certainly be additional work we would need to do to satisfy any questions that your other funding partner has, but also to provide you with, and that's not, there would be some delay while we had to do that work.
I think the problem I've got is that there's a lot of work that clearly still hasn't been, there's a lot of questions that haven't been able to be answered, and here we are 1 week out from a major 137 million whatever it was, decision. And I kind of feel like, I know there's been some delays with the FIFA Cup and what have you, but they weren't these kind of delays. We should have been having these conversations a whole lot earlier, in my view. I'm feeling very disconcerted about the decision.
Can I recommend, we're getting the papers tomorrow night. We have more briefings to be had over the next week. And we just sort of take it from there. We've got to receive the information, but I hear your concern, Sarah, and let's just take it over the next couple of days first. We're going to try our very best.
They're full of detail and full of figures.
Yeah, we might need to digest all the information before Monday. All right. Really thorough Q&A session, and appreciate you offering more time. And yeah,
whatever we can do to help.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate that this is an important decision for you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, team. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Haere mai ki tēnei hui. Thank you all for this morning. We have had a lot of hard work on this Kilbirnie Park Master Plan project, so your attention is welcomed. We have Chelsea, Alexi and Sheridan here to talk to us from the PSR team. Yeah, I'm happy to hand it over to you guys. Thank you.
Kia ora, ko Chelsea Takuingawa. Can you hear me okay? So I'm the project manager for Kilbirnie Park Master Plan. The purpose of this briefing is to provide you with an update in advance of the community engagement in July and August. We're not asking for any decisions at this stage. Councillors have already approved funding for the Destination Skate Park and additional park upgrades. It was agreed that a master plan would be developed to set the long-term vision for the site and to inform the decisions we make now and in the future. And so we're going to give you a bit of an overview of the pre-design engagement that was undertaken in March 2023, which has informed the development of the draft master plan so far. And then we'll be going back to the community mid-July, mid-August to reflect on what we've heard so far and to test the next steps in terms of concept development. So just to give you a bit of a background, as some of you may or may not be aware of the work we've been doing so far, the extent for this project is Kilbirnie Park and Evans Bay Park, and that includes the future skate park, which is allocated for this park. We've got lots of existing sports fields, we've got sports hub and club rooms, Wellington Regional Aquatic Centre, the Recreation Centre, a library, a play area, plunket rooms and car parking. So there's a lot going on at the site. And partly because of this, the Suburban Reserves Management Plan in 2015 outlined the need to develop a long-term master plan to prepare our strategy for the associated recreation that happens at the site. There's also a large number of trees that we want to protect and to build on to support bird life and ecological connectivity. So that was some of the actions that came out of that Suburban Reserves Management Plan. In addition, at the time there were plans for NZTA to extend State Highway 1, and so we need to think about the potential impact of that on the park. And so building on this action, we have now prepared a draft master plan to start thinking about all these impacts on the site. To give you some background, to enable this project, council's approved capital development funding for 1.5 million from the Plymouth Fund for open space enhancements to enable the master plan to happen. Additional CapEx funding to think about is $500,000 for playground renewals for the play space at the south end of the site. We also need earthquake strengthening for the Kilbirnie Recreation Centre, which is required by 2028. In conjunction to this, there's also been some other background work related to our play spaces policy. So the play spaces policy was done in 2017 and it promoted skate and scooter facilities. It recognised that skate facilities are important to our youth and there's a need for our facilities to be improved and increased across Wellington. In addition, the skate community engagement was done in 2020, which engaged with 800 representatives from the skate community. This document set out some key findings to improve the skate offering within Wellington, as it was acknowledged that skate in Wellington has been significantly underinvested compared to other sports and recreation activities in other regions and cities of similar sizes. In 2021, we had the Children and Young People strategy, which emphasised the need to deliver more safe and inclusive spaces for young people. And that includes places for young people to safely hang out, to play, to ride bikes and to skate. And so informed by all this work, it was being really clearly documented the community benefit for providing for skate. Councils directed officers to assess the feasibility and cost of a new destination skate park and to report back through the 22-23 annual plan process. Network analysis identified Kilbirnie Park as the preferred site for a destination skate park, and this was in part due to the proximity to a huge number of schools, but also the location in close proximity to public transport and the like. And so in April 2022, council has approved funding for a destination skate park. Sorry, I realised I've been skipping on my slides, but not your slides. But yeah, so here is here is the location that was identified for the destination skate park, and that's to go in the closed bowling greens, which is about 5,500 metres squared. So it's an appropriate size site for the skate offering that has been identified as important for the city. And so given all of these things that are going on at Kilbirnie Park, let's zoom back out to the master plan. So that's what we're doing now. We're not designing the skate park at the moment. What we're doing is planning for the wider park and how all of these things can work together. So some work was done by Wellington City Council Urban Regeneration team looking at the wider context to help inform the decisions we're making. So we need to think about the connectivity in the area. We need to think about provision of green space for Kilbirnie, the location of all the schools in the area, and how this park can enable more to happen in the site. We know that intensification is planned as part of the proposed district plan. And so what our open space and recreation strategy tells us is that this park is going to need to work harder to provide a more diverse offering for the neighbouring residents who are going to live around the park. Also looked at the history of the site. We've got a site of significance, Te Akotangi. Te Akotangi refers to the former shoreline, which was prior to reclamation. So actually the park itself used to be ocean for the most part. Te Akotangi can be taken as meaning the murmurous or resounding shore, the tangi of the waves. And so there's a lot of potential in the site for recognising mana whenua narratives and reflecting that in the site. Taranaki whānui have expressed an interest in the historical significance of the area and visually upholding that significance. So Mataho Aranui are currently working through the process for this with Taranaki whānui, as this will be critical in the next stages of the project. As I've alluded to, the site used to be ocean, and so as part of the history, thinking about that reclamation process that has happened over time. And as part of that, there are a few hazards to consider. For example, the fill has been flagged as the site is flagged as a contaminated site due to the fill that occurred over time. Also, because of that, there's liquefaction risk and also flooding risk. Most of the site is in an inundation area, with Wellington Road being an overland flow path. So these are all things that we need to be considering as part of the master planning. But part of this, these risks make the site better suited to public space than other purposes, such as residential, for example. It's a well-used site with a diverse range of recreation uses, so there's a lot of potential for improvement here, given the number of people that use this park. I just might skip over the future movement context, but just to also be aware that we've got Let's Get Wellington Moving projects planned for adjacent to the site, which will hopefully improve connectivity over time. So, jumping back a little bit higher level to the engagement that we did in March, following on from that research that we undertook. So we went out to the community to get their thoughts before we did any design work, to hear what their aspirations were for the site. This included having a workshop with representatives from key stakeholder groups, and we also attended the Weet-Bix Triathlon to talk to young people and their families about what they thought would be important for the site. We also had an online survey that had around 900 submissions, so that shows that there's just a huge amount of interest in this site. About 50% were from people who visited the site weekly, but then also from a diverse range of other types of users. A key thing that we found was that there was an overwhelming response in terms of the potential for skate at the site. 30% of respondents noted that they thought that there was potential for skate provision, which was a huge proportion of the overall number of submissions. Other things that were mentioned were the importance of having a play space upgrade and providing for passive recreation in addition to traditional sports that have been prioritised at the site. In terms of the desired experience, it was an overwhelming response about safety. People want to feel safe, they want it to be accessible, they want it to be open, friendly, inclusive, and to be welcoming. So that's a key theme that we want to come through in the project. Another aspect in terms of the vision for the future, overwhelmingly people emphasise that it's a community space, it's a hub for the community. So no matter what community you come from, we want this to be a community space. In addition, we've been thinking about the work that's been done on our open space and recreation strategy, and thinking about how we can integrate the key themes that have come up as part of that work into the project. So for example, point 1, integrated, it needs to be a multifunctional space that's going to be working harder for the future residents that are going to live around it. In terms of inclusivity, thinking about universal design thinking and embracing play and skate in the park. Point 3, regenerating and resilient. We need to be thinking about how we're adapting to climate change, connecting with nature and minimising our environmental impact. And point 4, re-indigenising. As I alluded to, there's a lot of potential at this site. In addition, there's the community facilities plan, which we're incorporating as part of the master planning work. As mentioned, Kilbirnie Recreation Centre has structural issues which must be resolved by 2028. Degasification of the Wellington Regional Aquatic Centre may require additional footprint for a new energy source, so we need to think about how that's going to be incorporated into the site. And also it's been flagged that there's need for covered indoor skate provision, and so considering the feasibility of the future of Kilbirnie Rec Centre and its purpose. In addition, the feasibility of combining the library and recreation centre to achieve more outcomes than they do on their own. And then I think the last one is, opportunity to develop benefits of co-location within the precinct. So these are all things that have come out of the community facilities plan, which we need to consider. So it's a lot of background. So next steps. Our consultants are finalising the draft master plan and developing some concepts. And so what we're planning is to go back to the community for engagement on these concepts in July and August. And so this will include a vision for over the next 30 plus years, key moves as to how to work towards that vision, and it will include 2 concept options for the open space upgrades, which focuses on integration of the destination skate park, the potential playground location, if it's in the right location or not, and also car park and access rationalisation, and planting. So there's a lot of things to incorporate as part of our options. But it will also be flagging all of those other complications that the site has and how we need to start responding to those. So that, that's what the consultants are working on. And so this diagram just demonstrates that in a bit more detail, showing how we'll have 2 concept options that the community can reflect back how their level of support or opposition to the concept, just to get a feel for where the community's at the moment. We're going to have 3 facets of the engagement. We're getting the key stakeholder group back together to present back to them. We're looking to focus on youth engagement for this round. And so there'll be potential on-site presence and activations for that. But also to connect with the wider community, we're going to be going back to our Let's Talk page with some content on there to respond to. Because it was really successful last time, particularly with the online presence. Instagram was our friend for getting a huge number of responses, so we want to build on our learnings from that. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of the vision and the key moves that's been presented by the consultants. 5 minutes? Yeah. But feel free to leave at any time if you need to go. It's all good. Yeah. So the vision is to create a cohesive, vibrant and accessible community and recreation hub that prioritises safety, embraces diversity and nurtures play, that's adaptable to future trends and infrastructure, and it will support the growth of the local area and serve as a key connector between people, places and culture. One of the key moves is predominantly focused on the findings from the Community Facilities Network Plan, which is to consolidate, thinking about co-locating facilities over time to achieve better outcomes as a whole, rather than being divided into parts. And that includes rationalising the car parking. At the moment, it's quite sprawling, and so the consultants have done some analysis which shows that we could take up less space but still retain the same number of car parks. So exploring that and how we might have different strategies over time as mode shifts change. We've got active pathways, thinking about how to improve safety and connectivity of the site. At the moment, there's a lot of barriers and it's really hard to get around as a pedestrian, and it's really not safe at the moment. So looking at improving that and making them multifunctional with activated edges. And that includes activating the blank facades of the buildings, which if you've been to Kilbirnie Park and looked at the back of RAC, there's a lot of potential for improving that. The other key move is green bind and destination, recognising that the site has so much potential, and if it works together collectively, that we can achieve better outcomes. So for example, if you're a family going to the park, you might be wanting to go to the sports fields with one child, but then the other child might be wanting to go to the playground. And how can these things work better together? So focusing on connecting up the park. The last key move is embracing the water and recognising the history of the site. And so, working with mana whenua to understand the opportunities around that, but also thinking about water-sensitive urban design and the feasibility of that. There are a lot of complications with the site that we need to understand, for example, the level of the water table and the actual practicality of water-sensitive urban design in the site and what our options are. So that's looping back to the next steps. And so I will open it up to questions now, I think.
Kia ora, Chelsea. Oh. Thank you. I've got 3 people on the question list. Iona, when did you need to head off? Is that all right if she jumps the queue? Yep, cool. All right, Councillor Pannett.
Just the Let's Get Welly moving stuff, I don't want to accommodate roading for parks, so this is just more really around the cycleways.
Yeah, so it's more as changes are made, we need to be thinking about how we connect into those. So if there's going to be a cycleway along Kilbirnie Crescent, for example, we need to be designing those interfaces so that's fine. Yeah.
That's fine. That's all good. Just the other question is long experience of dealing with flooding issues in this area. So and I want to be probably from now on tougher about what we're doing when we're in terms of adapting to climate change after we agreed to the Whale. So is it? I guess what are your projections in terms of the level, the amounts of flooding, and how adaptable will it be over the next century or so?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we are looking to get a water-sensitive urban design feasibility study done, and that will answer many of those questions. But we do have projections in terms of sea level rise and inundation levels, but also noting that, we need to think of this site as a green space for taking on water rather than the neighbouring residents.
Finished? Yeah, cool. Councillor Free.
So if you could just go back to the overview of the park, because I had a question that relates to that. Yeah, this map here. When we went to the drop-in for the city to Miramar City Streets work, one of the staff that was there said that it would be very nice to have the cycleway connect from the Evans Bay. Evans Bay, there's a nice cycleway, to Kilbirnie Crescent rather than go along the street, but the claim was made that the parks people wouldn't allow it or consider it. Yes, I was upset and complained because they really were bagging our council at a public consultation. But is there any prospect of actually being able to incorporate some kind of connection? It's actually the way a lot of people have seen them. They come into the beginning part of Evans Bay Parade and then they duck across behind the aquatic centre and come out, and then they're all ready to go up Moxham Ave.
You're completely right. That's why we've got that like really big pink line going across, because this is just such a key cross connection.
And it means that we wouldn't have to compromise the bus service, which is so busy on Kilbirnie Crescent, with trying to mix it with cycles. When there's maybe an alternative.
Yeah, I think it's important though to understand that there'll be a lot of different users using this way through, and so we need to provide a diverse range of cycling connections. And so on road can be really valuable for many for going north to south, but for the cross connection would be a slow zone shed, but wide enough that you'd be able to
and not all cyclists go
really fast
at high speeds. In fact, a lot that I see around Kilbirnie, increasingly are parents with kids on the back and that sort of thing.
Particularly understanding that there's lots of schools that use this cross connection, going from.
So the pink line is kind of a thought around it, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so why? I don't know why they said that then. It made me very upset and cross, I can tell you that much.
Okay, cool. Did you have any more partai, Councillor Free? No?
I'm really pleased. I'm really pleased by your work. I think it looks fantastic. And I'm really pleased that you've taken the water sensitive thing, because that park does flood and also streets flood. So just some thought to how it can be used as a bit of a soak when we have those extreme weather events is really good to see. And I love the idea of like all age activities as well. So when families go there, there's kind of like different levels of
cool
activity. Yeah, I think it looks good. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yes, echo Councillor Free's thoughts there. And my question was around the Arkotangi Pa site. That's quite an exciting, on many levels. But can you just unpack a little bit more about how we might tell the story or represent, or how are we working with mana whenua on that, and what are some of the possibilities maybe?
Yeah, it's a really good opportunity. Taranaki whānui have had a lot of capacity issues at the moment. There's a lot of cycleway work that they're involved with. So we've been working with Mātaho Aranui to develop those options at the moment. And while we're waiting for a cultural advisor to be able to input on the project. So at the moment we've been talking about working with the narrative of the Murmuring Shore to understand the site in terms of experience, both based on like places to reflect and have more places of calm, and versus other places that are more boisterous. And so those are kind of the narratives that we're starting to build on through the design process, and then we'll be reflecting that back to Taranaki whānui for feedback. And then throughout the process we're hoping to get a cultural designer to be involved in how do we reflect that in terms of actual site elements, but that'll happen throughout the process.
I've got a few questions and then we'll jump to you. Yeah, that's really exciting. I understand in the early development of this project we were looking at all the other buildings and surrounding. Is the scope for things like carbon neutrality for the regional aquatic centre within the scope of the Kilbirnie Park project? Because I remember on the outside of the building.
So that is a separate project and we're just feeding into it as to how the park in a wider context needs to respond and accommodate for different space allocations.
Cool. And then a more specific question around CPTED, or the crime prevention through environmental design. Will this kind of be a space with lots of eyes on it? I've had different people from the community asking if it's going to be like well lit at night and other things like that. Is that?
Those are, key aspirations. And so our consultants have included CPTED principles as part of the design process, so there's got those reviews throughout that are planned.
Cool, awesome. Councillor Free?
You beat me to it. I was going to ask about, and thank you, Terry. I was going to ask about the septic as well, because it does occur to me there's going to be potential for all sorts of people to be in this area, and that might be off-putting to all sorts of people. So, yeah, I guess just good lighting, lots of different types of activities happening 24/7 if you can.
Yeah.
So you're not getting those kind of more antisocial things happening. Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking, boys' schools, yeah, anything, just.
I think that's a key part of this active pathways key move, is to try to make it activated, because as we know, having people using the space makes it safer.
It does.
So that's why skaters are actually really valuable in our community, because they are in the space, using the space, and it makes it feel safer.
Yeah, and I'm not one to sort of overemphasise this, but I think it's good that, Terry's obviously thought the same thing. Yeah, we want it well used and we want it to be safe.
Cool, kia ora, thank you. I have no more partai, but I just wanted to extend thanks to you, Chelsea, Alexi and Sherilyn, for your mahi around this. I know it's got the community really excited in and around our area, so we'll be really looking forward to it. Are there any outgoing comments you have, or when will we see you next for an update?
Good question. I hadn't thought of that. I guess we'd probably give you an update after we've had engagement with the community, when we have the skate park concept and are preparing the business case.
Cool, awesome. Feel free to invite any of the Te Motukarangi councillors along to that, and I will be very keen. But yeah, thanks for your time today. Cheers.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
discuss the zero waste program priority business cases. Yay! So yes, passing it over to Chris Orchard to kick us off. Thank you.
I thought you were going to introduce me. So, hi, I'm Chris. Everyone knows me, and everyone knows Stefan, and everyone knows Dill, correct? Yep. Cool. Thanks for coming along, those of you that turned up. I'm joking. So, the intent of today is to have a discussion on the approach that we're taking to these business cases. There will be another session that happens, another council briefing that happens in August that goes through the detail of those business cases prior to them going up. And the reason why we're doing this discussion, having this discussion now is, look, I've been involved in a few business cases over the years, and this is one of the most complicated business cases I've ever been involved in. So I just wanted to have a discussion around the system and how we're going to be approaching these business cases given the complexity. I'm going to run through the presentation. You feel free to jump in if you've got questions. Hopefully we'll answer most of them. So we're focusing on collections and processing business case, and then the resource recovery. So collections and processing is probably the most prominent one at the moment. I won't go over the strategy that we've articulated before, and I think I've just described this slide already. We all know that we have our zero waste strategy. We've signed up to that and the associated targets, and these business cases are the key vehicle to help us get there, and we are focusing on how we improve the participation and diversion. Just want to pause here on the ecosystem so everyone understands what we're talking about here. So we have waste collections, and when we're looking through these business cases, we're considering what types of waste we want to collect, waste or recycling. So at the moment, you know that we have our mixed recycling, which is fibre and plastic, and then we also have glass, and then we also have standard rubbish. We could also have organics, and then so you're thinking about what you can collect, and then you're also thinking about how you can collect it. So if you move to a commingled system of glass and plastics, you do get some efficiency from the collections, but it requires a different type of process, and it also changes your aftermarkets. So understanding what you want to collect is key. Then you need to think about the frequency of that and the volume of the containers and where you collect it from. And as councillors, this is the area where you have the most influence, I suppose, is setting those levels of service. And then if you set the level of service, then we determine how you process it and what the aftermarkets are. From there, on the left-hand side there, I don't have a little shiny light thing though, but if I did, you can see on the left-hand side there under the collections area, you have the resource recovery network. So this is the integrated part where the community comes in, and we support them by providing them with ways to process it. Moving along, I'll ignore the sludge minimisation plant. I think everyone knows the role that plays. Then you move on to the resource recovery park is where we process it. So what we collect and how we process it, what we collect determines how we process it, and then it also determines what the aftermarkets are. And I'll just give you a quick example. If we collect a glass bottle, it has to go all the way up to Auckland and be processed a certain way. If we were to commingle and our glass with our other types of recycling, then you have a high level of contamination, which means that you have to crush it. If you have to crush it, it has to go to a different market, which is something like Fulton Hogan for roading. So all of these decisions that you make up the top impact your processing and your aftermarkets. Any questions? Sorry? It's a good diagram. Yeah.
Will we have sort of in the business case those options about in terms? That's a really good point about the processing. Yep, and the community role, will that be detailed in quite a lot of depth so that they really are integrated?
It will to a degree. I can probably answer that a little bit later if that's okay. Yep, sure. I've spoken about this before, but we have all the moons are aligned for us at the moment. We've got our strategy approved. The government's got its new strategy out. There's legislation that's most likely to follow. We've got a whole bunch of government funding. Our curbside contract finishes in 2026, so getting this right now is the perfect timing when you consider what your contract looks like, We've obviously got the sludge going in, which will help remove that ratio challenge that we've currently got. And from an operational point of view, we've got a whole bunch of bins and crates and other equipment that's at its end of life. So now is the perfect time to be making these decisions, and it aligns with the LTP.
It seems pretty chill in terms of asking questions, so feel free to put your hand up and no, that's
what percentage of the wheelie bins and crates are reaching the end of the life? Because when I see ours around the neighbourhood, they look, well, mostly they look great. We look after them, and we don't want to be wasting by getting rid of waste infrastructure.
I'm not sure on the exact percentage. Stefan may have a view on that, but if we are going to change the system, we will be needing to most likely replace the crates and the wheelie bins as part of this process. Do we have I don't know the exact
in terms of the current condition, the current bins and crates are actually in pretty good nick. We do replace them, we do repair bins as and when required. But I think what we're suggesting here is that as we draw to the that 2026 date, those bins, more of those bins will need to be repaired over that time. But at the end of that, there might be an opportunity to reuse some of those crates and bins depending on the service that is selected.
Probably in hindsight, I shouldn't have put that in there, because it is rather academic, to be fair, when you look at the big picture that we're trying to solve.
I hope that right through the process that we're thinking about reducing waste, and are we going to get a same size recycling bin, or are we going to get a bigger one?
I'm going to answer all of them soon, if that's okay. Yep. So I just want to get to the part where we talk to the business case and the options, how it all it's going to come together. So I'm being a little bit provocative here, but I don't think as a council, not a council, rather a region, we're not leading the pack, so to speak. We haven't made any significant changes since around 2006. Most of the other major city councils are moving ahead or have plans to move ahead, and they're more advanced than us. So I think we do have some work to do here, and even some of the existing services that we provide, we've got about 22,000 people currently that don't provide any, don't receive a service, be it through private streets or multi-unit dwellings. So we've got that challenge. And the other challenge we've got here is we've got quite a fragmented curbside service. So the council delivers around 40% of that. The balance, the 60%, is delivered through private sector services. And what that really means is you've got a dump truck turning up on your street every day to do the Joneses, then the Smiths. So the fragmented network has a lot of disbenefits from an efficiency and also obviously a carbon footprint and just an annoyance factor, to be honest. So we will be considering this as part of the review. This touches on the strategy, but I will just go there quickly again. We know that we need to move towards a circular economy. Everyone understands that. That's why the strategy was signed out. But we also need to have a shift in the financial sustainability of this system too. So we need to work out. So when we are collecting this material, we are reusing it. We have our MRF. We're looking at organics. There's good aftermarkets for that. So the point here is that we can design a system that's financially self-sustainable as well, that doesn't solely rely on tons of waste that goes into the landfill to come in. So looking at the aftermarkets component of this work is key to us. And then obviously once you understand that, you need to make sure you get the right behavioural change elements in place to help transition people to that shift. And again, the areas that we're focused on is making it accessible and affordable for people. From a contextual point of view, we do have the right mechanisms wrapped around this. We've got our strategy, we've got the laws coming over the top, we've got our service and infrastructure key projects. We've got the WMP, so that aligns regionally. We've introduced the waste operator license, which for the first time gives us really good access to information about what people are collecting, where the waste is going, certainly from a commercial point of view. We've got the sludge, we've got the landfill, and these are the two remaining components that are going to actually help us deliver this change. On to the business case. So I'm going to talk firstly about the collections one. The challenge. Wellington's Wellington. You could look outside your door and realise the challenges we have. If we were rolling this out in Canberra, it'd be very easy. Big, fat, wide streets, no hills. We don't live there. So the challenge that we're going to face throughout this is we need to design, I'm just going to go next slide, we need to design a standard service, but with a bespoke service to collect it. So we've got so many narrow streets around Wellington that a wheelie bin solution is not going to work for everyone. We can't even use the same type of truck. We've got multi-unit dwellings which require their own solution. So whilst we're going to have different solutions in terms of how we collect the rubbish and the recycling, we want to provide the same actual level of service to all of our residents across the city. There's around 1.3 million different combinations. That's actually not. It's even more than that, because we have different types of material. But what that doesn't touch on is how we collect. So whether we have commingling or not, or other solutions. We need to think about how many people we reach as part of this, the frequency of the collection, the bin size, the bin type, and then how we process it. And there's so many different combinations. So in order to give you something that's not going to completely blow your mind, we're obviously not going to give you that many. What we need to do is package this up in a way that makes sense. So the approach that we've taken is we'll use this multi-criteria analysis, and this is pretty standard for this type of work. I mean, how accessible is it? How much do you divert? What's the environmental impact? What does it cost? What's the circularity of the whole thing? And safety. Now, safety is a big one. So if for example, you can move to a commingled system that collects garbage using wheelie bins and machinery, that's obviously a better health and safety impact than someone having to bend down and run across the street all the time. So all these factors are coming in. I'm just going to pause here if you've got any questions on this or the multi-criteria analysis.
Was community considered as one of the criteria? Community outcomes?
I think community outcomes are delivered somewhat through the environmental. So are you talking about the resource recovery network and how that comes into this? Because
yeah, it's a bit comboed, isn't it? But
well, yeah, I suppose what we're trying to do is focus on the standard levels of service, which is around recycling and rubbish collection and processing. The other resource recovery network is more of a separate exercise. I think if you try and combine those two waste systems into one business case, it would become far too complicated, and there's too many interdependencies that it wouldn't be sustainable. So, but if we can, how about to talk further, Laurie? Like, is there? Sorry, Councillor.
Yeah, it's right. I'll just have a think about it.
Yeah, have a think about it. Yep.
Just always thinking about different population groups and whether we'll look at that, like, so for families, large families or single people, and will we have lots of accessible information too in different languages and, sort of make sure.
So the change, so you're referring to the change management, engagement and communication process. So that part will be addressed. And the first part of your question is around the standardisation versus being more bespoke. No, I mean, there's been, Dills at Hutt City, they did a rollout. They faced the exact same questions, and what they opted for was essentially a standard service to begin with. Then people can change this service once or twice a year. So that's going to be part of the design to work out what's the best service. But in Wellington City's case, it might not be change your wheelie bin. You might be changing from a wheelie bin to a bag or some other type of model. But it will come through in the business case.
Have you talked to mana whenua about this too?
About this one component?
Yeah, this business case?
Yeah. So we've been engaged as part of the overall zero waste program. We've been engaged with mana whenua the whole way along. We've had some good engagement. I think we're facing the same challenge that a lot of other places are with respect to capacity, but we do have a partnership arrangement with them all signed up, so they're engaged, and we do go along and present to them. So we're engaged with them at at the right level for the entire program, and then from there they determine what level of input they want on each individual project. Just moving on, the packages. So the way that we'll approach this, we're having so for the organics component, we'll have a long list. There's a fatal flaw analysis, i.e. the ones that are just completely unsustainable. And then from there we move to a short list and then a best option. So we'll go through and have 2 of the best organics, 3 recycling and 2 rubbish. And then from there we'll come back with, we'll have 10 to 20 options to build the packages upon. And then once we have those options, then we'll go into, once we have those options, we'll go into a really detailed analysis on them, and we'll provide you back with a preferred option and then 2 other options for you to consider. So it'll have the multi-criteria analysis, it'll have some cost-benefit analysis and the sensitivity. What it won't do is land on a $1 figure, and there's a reason for that. Because what we want to do is once you have your preferred options coupled with your level of service, then we can do early contractor engagement and come back with a really sharp price in May, which will align to the LTP timeline. Because what you don't want to do is to get to the point, in order to provide you with 3 really sharp prices, you would have to determine the technology required to process in the aftermarket. And you can't really do that until it's clear what type of service level collection the councillors would prefer. So but you will receive, I believe, all the information required to have a pretty good understanding of obviously the level of service, and that'll all be worked out. But in terms of the actual costs, you'll have a good ballpark there. So what you'll do, so the preferred option, that's what you'll get in September, and then once you decide that, we'll come back with the detailed commercial case to either progress or not progress.
Will you stress test it for different households?
Yeah.
Okay, so
you mean different household types?
That, but also just low-income households, will they be able to afford it? Because we always get this thing about, can we have free rubbish bags for the lowest paid, or...
Yeah, we have to take a careful approach to that. We definitely will do that, and that will come out in the business case. There's got to have to be an affordability lens put over the top of this, which is why this. So that's the cost one there. So the affordability, the 4th one down, that will look at that as well.
And obviously the issue, well, if it's rates funded, that will be different. Can I just ask, Dill, do you think you did some analysis at HUT whether it was cheaper to do it rates or to have user pays?
It's always cheaper to do it on rates. Yep, and that's a national trend. The appetite to put it on rates is another thing for us to consider. So if we look at it as a system, then what other activities can we undertake that can offset some rates? Is something that we will also be investigating with regards to the business model. Yeah.
So that is the collections business case. Is there any questions before I move across to the resource recovery, which is a bit shorter to explain?
No, I'll just say you actually did a really good job at taking 1.35 million options and making it pretty clear what we're being asked to...
We haven't done it yet.
No, I'm glad it's not me.
I'm going to be a bit pedantic. It was 2011 we agreed the recycling bins. It wasn't 2006. And it would be quite useful just to highlight the kind of the slow, painful work that a few of us have been trying to do over the years, because, we are lagging. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll change that. It was John Key. Resource Recovery Park.
Oh, sorry. Chris, I would like a little bit of analysis done on the 4 well-beings in terms of the collection system, even so that we can answer with certainty. We've looked at it, and if it is in resource recovery, all good, but that we've seen that as one of those criteria for the MCA that it's... Yep. We've got a reason why. If we're not including it, why we're not.
Okay. We'll work on that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I've got a question on that first part. Have you heard about waste colonialism? Yeah, so there's a petition in Parliament at the moment.
No,
and
I haven't, sorry.
It's about banning tips and stuff from sending, or councils, whoever, from sending certain plastic overseas to poor countries to like burn and process and stuff like that. So can we, when you do develop it, can you look into that and like?
Yeah. So that'll be part of the aftermarket analysis. I mean, we do. I mean, unfortunately, that's the reality. The vast majority of plastic goes overseas. I mean, we have done audits before on where it goes, and we've actually sent officers across before, as, you know, through OG. But it is a concern, and I hadn't heard of that. But I'll look into that and make sure that we do need to have a level of confidence of where it's going across, and that's the big challenge for New Zealand at the moment is getting the plastic across. It's actually the shipping that's the biggest challenge. It's not finding the aftermarkets. It's getting ships to pick it up and collect it, because it's not the most popular thing to transport.
What do they do with it when it gets sent overseas? Can you tell us? Like, what actually happens with it when it this aftermarket? What happens when it goes over to these countries? What do they do with it?
Do you want to answer that? I mean, I can give a really layman's answer. You might have a better one, or you. Anyone?
No, thank you. The recycled stuff has a value, like paper, aluminium, and all of that. That has a value, but there are certain hard to recycle plastics that developed countries probably just shift the burden to underdeveloped countries, and that is either landfill or burnt, and that's a reality.
Yeah, that's
And
really stuffed up.
With regards to your question of the analysis that we need to do, a piece of work that we are doing with regards to the business model, we will look at chain of custody of how we are managing the whole life cycle from collections to processing, and also afterwards. At the moment, our contractors collect and process and ship. If we are to get into that sort of business, we need to start looking at that chain of custody so that we can have better control. And MFE is going to be a key partner for us to work with regards to that aspect.
So we are sending our country to, our rubbish to, some of our rubbish to developing countries. Can I just clarify, are they paying us or are we paying them?
They are not paying us.
So we're paying them?
Yeah, but we don't know what the proportion is, and we don't do it. As councils or territorial authorities, we don't get involved in that. We get involved to the level that we are paying our contractors to collect the waste and process it.
And then they've got the deals.
Their relationships sits with the contractors.
So some types of plastic can be more easily recycled and repurposed than others. So I think what we are seeing from the New Zealand government now is some soft plastics and other types of plastics being banned, which is great. I think some of it does get recycled, and then I think some of it, we'd have to say, does end up in landfill. And I think that's the reality of the situation that we're dealing with at the moment. But we are seeing a big push particularly from developing countries. And you saw this, the Chinese sword when they stopped accepting all of the waste. So I think the system's moving in the right direction. But what Dill's talking about too is, rather than always outsourcing our materials, our MRF, recycling centre thing, we do have some options to look at. Is this something that we should take more control over so we can make sure that we're happy where the aftermarkets are?
Following on from that, there is still colonisation, obviously, in this country in terms of waste. So that's why I did ask the question just around the use of land. So we're putting toxins, I could use some ruder words, right, into the land, which I think is problematic. So, and I guess just having maybe a Te Ao Māori lens over this would be quite helpful as well. But I think, that the way we use land is also, and that's why I absolutely refuse to call it a landfill.
Okay.
Very offensive term, actually, I think. So if we can just think about that.
Yep.
Too, that would be good.
At the dump.
Oh, because we don't need to fill the land with our rubbish. It's gross.
Right, I'll keep going, shall I? The next is a resource recovery business case. This is made up of two components. The first one is part A, is where what we're looking at here is what are the resource recovery park options that we could potentially set up at a landfill. So this is around having having diversion and being able to process material as it comes in and send it off to the appropriate aftermarkets. So what we're looking here is what is the available land that we have, exploring the capacity and the capability we need, and then looking at some different concept design options. So that's kind of the resource recovery network for us. Is in Wellington City, and then obviously there's a large role that the community plays as well. So part of this, the second piece of work is looking through what are the different options that we have to set up these resource recovery centres within the community. What type of land do we need? What type of services we collect? And then obviously how do we support that system by making sure that we help them get to aftermarkets? And I think that's the big challenge we face is finding the land. Finding the people to work in them, that's fairly easy. We've got a lot of people that can do that type of work. So finding the land and then making sure that we've got the suitable aftermarkets, because we don't necessarily have the scale that other countries or potentially other cities within Wellington, within New Zealand has. So making sure that we establish those aftermarkets and that the materials are going to the right place to be reused. So, yeah.
So how much land can we free up if we're not filling it up with so much rubbish?
Are you asking me how much land is at the southern land?
For expanding of good activities rather than bad ones.
I think when you do remediate land, I think there's usually regulatory conditions over the top. That means you have to put native plants and things like that on. So I'm not sure how much of that land we can use, but that's a good Stefan question, I'd say.
Yeah, as Chris said, the landfill extension is being proposed on top of the existing site. So there's a current closed landfill underneath there. And as part of that extension, we do need to remediate the stage 3, which is the further back landfill, and also remediate the extension once that's filled, and potentially find some additional space. So yeah, land capacity at the southern landfill is at a premium as well. Yeah. So apart from the actual tip area, how much other land is there? Like, you can put that in the business case, yes. Right? How many hectares or whatever?
That's going to be part of the business case. What available land do we have, or what if we did need to acquire land? What might that look like? So that's all part of it.
And for the Brooklyn community, you will look at the transport to the recovery centre as well, because it's such an issue for them. Yeah,
absolutely. Yep. So that's what we're bringing back there, and I just want to go. So these are the timeline. So we're undertaking the options analysis now. Then we'll do the quantitative analysis and go through with a multi-criteria analysis as well. So engaging with our stakeholders as part of this. We'll bring up some options for the council through the business cases in September. And then from there, when you review the different options, you'll have a preferred selection, a preferred one, and then we'll do the detailed analysis and come back with the sharp commercial case and what that might look like. And we're also partnering with other organisations as part of this as well.
Apartments, you did cover that.
Yep.
This is a massive issue, right? Because we'll have more people living in them, and also they're not getting the same level of service that they have to pay for it. So, look, we've tried to address that a bit through the district plan. Are you confident that we will be able to offer a decent level of service to them?
I'm confident I can give you options, and you can select whatever level of service you want, which will include that.
So if they, so for the inner city, will there be a place where people might be able to leave their rubbish if we can't get the trucks in?
Yeah, so
it's going to be really difficult.
So what we're working towards is trying to get the same level of service for everybody. So we're going to give you options. If you want to get the same level of service as you have out in Karori, or sorry, wherever you live, I forget now, Mount Vic, then you should get the same level of service no matter what your postcode is. So we'll provide you with options for that.
Okay, that's good. And then just the other issue was around resilience. Are we going to, through this business case, encourage people, though, to deal with their own waste or resources on site?
That'll be part of the options. Yeah. So, for example, an option could be we roll out organics. organics curbside collection. An option could be that we just say, here's an organics bin, go do it yourself. In more elegant phrases.
Interior.
There'll be a self-perform option. So we are looking at all options.
Okay. I just want to. It would be great if maybe you just finish the presentation.
Yeah,
then we'll
I'm
go into all
close.
the detail,
I can
all the
feel it.
detailed questions.
Okay, I'm just going to go to the councillor decision points. So, as mentioned earlier, we're going to provide a detailed waste business case briefing in August, and I recommend you come to this because it probably will be quite complicated before you get the papers. Then from there, we obviously have the E&I committee, which is in mid-September. Alongside that, you have your level of service LTP discussion, which obviously the two are linked. Then the LTP budget consultation decision rather goes out. You have your draft LTP, and then from there we will bring in the water, the detailed waste commercial case. And I've spoken with strategy and Baz and a few other people on this, and I've been assured that the timing is sufficient to be loaded into the LTP, that we are actually consulting on levels of service. So whilst we won't have an absolute sharp price in the business case that comes in September, we'll have enough information there to be able to work forward and provide a sharp price in the detailed commercial case that comes in April and May. Any questions?
Here we go. All right. So we've got Deputy Mayor Foon. Who else has a question? Cool. Go.
Just additional space. I've got a couple of questions. They should be quite quick. Kiwi Quarry, is that a possibility for some location?
Possibly. We're working through the, so we're using Kiwi Point Quarry as a clean fill at the moment. So it's already within the waste system.
So then, are we having discussions with C&D, and how are they tracking?
Yeah, it's ongoing discussions with C&D at the moment. There's not much movement at this point in time, but I'm working through that.
Okay. And last term, thanks to Councillor Pennant, we managed to win a $2 million for a resource recovery to go toward that in the budget. How's that being placed for this term?
It's included within, if we won two. Oh, when did we move $2 million?
It's got a spare $2 million. Perhaps we could follow that up with Andrea.
Yeah, follow that up. If there is $2 million that's been allocated, we're happy to use it.
Yeah, sure.
When was that decision made?
That was LTP last term, before all of your time.
Right. Okay.
Could someone else follow that up for me?
Yeah, so $2.2 million is in FY24, so it is.
It is there. It is in there?
Yeah, next. Yeah.
Sorry, can I ask? I've missed it.
A whole lot, but can I ask what that $2.4 million is for?
Oh, well, it sounds like we're going to get some more detail on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a lot of detail just given now, but that's all right.
That's all I have.
Cool. Does anybody have any other questions? Otherwise, we can break shortly before we go into another workshop in 20 minutes. Yep, go ahead.
So just to clarify, so with the food scraps collection service, like that is a resource, and we've got systems that are being developed around, say, community composting at the moment, whereby people can walk their scraps down, and then that will go directly into a compost system, into a community garden. How will this enable that resource cycle, which isn't actually in this system that you're talking about?
I think we've spoken about this a few times. I met with Kai Cycle. I think it's a complementary system. So it does make sense to for them to continue the service, and some communities are going to engage in this. However, from a system point of view, we need to make sure, and from a council point of view rather, that we are designing a system that does meet everyone's needs. So if you go back to the 2 points that we're really targeting, it's got to be easy and accessible. So that's what I'm always thinking about as we go through this. People need to be able to get rid of their waste, have it recycled in an easy and accessible and affordable manner. And then I think that there is plenty of integration opportunities with the existing smaller providers. However, their challenge is and always will be operating at scale, and we can operate at scale for a lower cost. So that's why, that's a consideration when we are designing this business case. But we still need to make sure that we do have an integrated system there.
I'll let Councillor Free go, just if she's.
Sorry to have come so late to the piece, but if we are going to have a bespoke, collection, food waste collection over and above people doing their own thing, will it be user pays?
That's what the...
Yeah, so I mean, I'm happy to go over this.
No, it's okay. I'll ask you later because I missed it probably.
Sarah, this also is on YouTube if you want to rewatch it later.
Yeah, nice. I've been doing other things, but yeah.
Well, that's not really our problem, so. Councillor Pennant?
Sorry, you go.
Oh, just one point. I mean, MFE is, they proposed in their latest strategy that organics waste will be mandated by 2027 to 2030. So we do have the regulatory model hanging over our heads as well. But our work here is to work out what's the best system to deliver against that.
Yeah.
Just a final question following on from Laurie's. Look, you're talking about ease. I'm just sceptical that many people will deliver their compost to another, to an organic place. Even I won't do it. So you'd be looking at possibly the community providers being able to come to people's houses like they do with Kaicycle.
Could be a model.
Yeah, okay. But that's definitely front of mind, that it should be as easy to just deal with your organics as it is with your recycling at the moment.
That's exactly what we're trying to do, at a system level. Yeah.
And this is probably just back to the last one about the collection service. Just when you talked about if it could be rates funded, so we're going to unpack the system that we've got now, where we've got a ring-fenced system, whereby that money stays in the waste pool, to going into a broader, possibly look at the option of a broader system where everything is rates, paid for through rates, but then will that still be a ring-fenced operation?
What you're asking me there are questions that I'm not accountable for. I mean, there's how the funding and financing work is really a question for the CFO. What I'll be bringing back is what are these going to cost? So I'm looking more so at the funding component, so the financing component, then the funding component. So I'm looking at what it's actually going to cost, and then how the council determines to pay for that, or if they determine to pay for that, is something that would need to be decided by someone else.
Yes, ring fence now. Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
They might need to be a little bit informed.
They will be as part of the business case. I'm just trying to. What I'll be doing is providing the options on how much these things are going to cost, and I just need to work with the finance team for them to provide advice on the other part.
Great.
Cool. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of our briefing. Thank you so much, Chris, Stefan, Dill.
Yeah, thanks, Stefan.
And to all the awesome team at the back there, thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed our questions. Cool. And, so yeah, thanks everybody. And so I think we're going downstairs to the mayor's office now for the there's a